sexiness? Personal preference? Or a complex biological equation? A new breed of researcher and a host of human guinea pigs uncover the surprising, sometimes shocking, science of sex appeal. Each to his own, right? Wrong. Sex appeal is not a matter of taste. It's a biological imperative. Evolution is driving how we pick partners, and science can prove it. We're hardwired to read genetic clues in a potential mate's face, body shape and sway, scent, and voice.
Sorry.
And it looks as if women have an even more complex sexual agenda than men.
So we used to think that mate preferences were something completely arbitrary, that beauty was in the eye of the beholder. In recent years, the evidence is suggesting that that's probably not the case. There are lots of things that are going on non-consciously that we have no control over. Beauty is not arbitrary. What's handsome is not arbitrary. All around the world, men and women find certain things attractive and other things less attractive.
We all operate according to a genetic playbook. It tells us to couple with the hottest partner we can snag and makes us love being in love. Monogamy, even cheating, turn out to be programmed behavior. Everything is directed at passing on the best genes to our offspring and to giving those offspring the best shot at survival. Where does the science of sex appeal begin? With the face. One look can stir a passion that lasts a lifetime.
I thought I was a little out of my league, probably. And that had a lot to do with her face. And, I mean, she's a beautiful girl. She's got amazing lips and a perfect nose. Her eyes, the shape and the color of them is pretty much ideal for me.
I remember you had your hair so nice, you was dressed so nice, and your cheekbones. You have the highest cheekbones I have ever seen on a female. And I was like, is that real?
The first thing I noticed were her eyes. And I thought she had really cute ears. And then I just kind of progressed from there downward.
He had on really thick Coke bottle glasses, but I could see through that he had the most beautiful face and smile and big, huge brown eyes. And I just fell in love with just his whole little face.
Across the centuries, certain faces have achieved immortality for their allure, their sexiness. For just as long, artists, scientists, and philosophers have tried to figure out just what makes a face drop-dead gorgeous. The Greeks believed the secret lay in a mathematical formula. Plato called it the golden ratio, an equation for perfection. Take a space and divide it into two parts. The golden ratio is when the relative size of the small part to the big part is the same as the ratio of the big part to the whole. It's about 2/3 of the way across. It turns out you can find the golden ratio in the structure of many living things, including human beings. Many anatomical proportions in the hands, feet, arms, torso, and face come close to matching this mathematical balance. Kendra Schmid, a statistician at the University of Nebraska, uses the golden ratio to rate a face's sex appeal.
We started with having people rate a series of images based on their attractiveness. We did find that some features are more important to attractiveness than others. The width of the eye being equal to the distance between the eyes, and the ratio of the mouth width to the nose width being equal to the golden ratio is important.
All Kendra has to do is mark key points on someone's ears, eyes, nose, and mouth, and her software calculates how close that face comes to the golden ratio. If you look like Greta Garbo, you'll score a 6.5. 10 is perfection, but anything over 6 is attractive. Nefertiti gets a 6.8.
This is a picture of a volunteer, and she scored about a 4.7, and that's a pretty average score.
Over 7, and you're a knockout.
And then Kirk Douglas, who's also about a 7.
Kendra's program and the golden ratio make no distinctions between male and female beauty, but masculinity and femininity have a lot to do with what makes a face sexy. Psychologist Lisa DeBrine has spent years analyzing male and female faces. She works at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland in the foremost face research lab in the world. Like Kendra Schmid, Lisa breaks down the human face into its component parts: the eyes, nose, mouth, and skin.
These are pictures of an average woman and an average man. They're made from averaging together 60 different student-aged Caucasian women or men. And they can show us what differences there are between male and female faces. The female faces have a slightly smaller jaw. It's less squared than the male jaw. And they have thinner brows than these thicker brows that men have. Men have a more sort of square hairline.
But DeBrine doesn't just analyze faces, she creates new ones, taking real people, then exaggerating certain features.
Here's an individual woman's face, and we can make her face more masculine. You can see her jaw getting slightly larger, her eyes seem to narrow, and the eyebrows come down. And you can see then, as we make her face more feminine, the jaw tends to get thinner, the eyebrows get thinner and come up.
Which of these faces do you find more attractive? This one or this one? DeBrine tested the masculinized, feminized, and unaltered faces on numerous subjects. 81% of the men preferred the more feminine woman, and a majority of women preferred the manlier man. The differences between men's and women's faces are caused by the sex hormones.
When children are young, boys' and girls' faces are really similar, but they start to change at puberty, and boys' faces, they get longer, the jaw gets bigger, the brows get heavier, and this is all due to the action of testosterone. A very masculine face in a man suggests that he has high testosterone, and a woman's face that's very feminine suggests that she has higher female hormones like progesterone and estrogen, and has a healthy reproductive system.
Most of us seem to be drawn to members of the opposite sex who got a strong dose of sex hormones during puberty. These faces indicate good health and fertility.
When we say someone looks attractive, what we're actually saying is that that person probably has good genes. That person is probably reproductively healthy. If I pair up with that individual and we have children, that those children will do quite well.
When we spot someone sexy across a room, the spark we feel stems from a lightning-fast subconscious analysis of that person's face. But the brain does more than simply assess a potential partner's sex hormone levels. The face holds another major clue to genetic and physical health: symmetry. Imagine you could split your face in two and superimpose one side onto the other. Your eyes would line up evenly, your smile would be straight, and your nose, cheeks, and forehead would be perfectly balanced. The symmetry of our faces is determined by events that took place before we were even born. The human fetus is designed to grow in 2 equal parts around the central axis of the spine. But it doesn't always happen that way. Tiny genetic abnormalities, poor nutrition, even mild infections can slightly alter our facial design, leaving a permanent, if subtle, record. De Bruijn devised an experiment to test the connection between symmetry and sex appeal. She chose a man and a woman and switched into makeover mode.
I'm moving the approximately 200 different points into the landmark places so we can determine exactly where the asymmetries lie. Then I can calculate what's a symmetric shape for her face and warp it into that symmetric shape. Here's a picture of the same woman, but wearing a different outfit and with different hair. And now I'm going to make her face less symmetric by exaggerating the asymmetries that are already present in her face.
Lisa mounted the pictures on a university wall, told passers-by they were twins, and asked which was the more appealing and why.
She looks much more feminine in the left one. She's like slim, neat, tidy, and the other one's just like a rugged man.
Woman on the left looks quite feminine and very well postured.
Him. Okay. I'd say I find this one more attractive.
With the right one. The right side of the face seems to be in a different level than what the left side of the face was.
I think he's more attractive. He has less darker circles. His lips aren't at an angle.
8 out of 10 men and women preferred the symmetrical face. They're subconsciously responding to fundamental clues about physical and genetic health, clues planted in the womb. But just as we're looking for clues about other people's genetic health, we're trying to advertise our own. One of the strangest findings in face research is that faces can undergo subtle changes from one day to the next. De Bruijn has gathered evidence that women get more attractive when they're ovulating.
We've done studies looking at how women's faces change across the menstrual cycle and compared what their faces look like at ovulation when they're most likely to get pregnant and at other times in the cycle when they're less likely to get pregnant, and had people choose between the two faces. And people were more likely to choose the face at ovulation as the more attractive face. Now, we're not entirely clear why there's this difference, but we think that the women might look healthier, have a bit of a healthier glow when they're ovulating.
Masculine, feminine, symmetrical, fertile. All secret components of attraction. And that's just for starters. There's a lot more to sex appeal than just a pretty face. What makes a body sexy? Judging from the images advertisers bombard us with, the ideal woman has a thin waist, curvaceous hips, long and slender legs. For a man, it's broad shoulders, strong pectoral muscles, and washboard abs. But are these the features we all find attractive? Science has unlocked the secrets to a sexy face. Now, it's time to move down.
Sometimes she'll just give me a little flash, and that's...
Sometimes.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's nice.
He's proportional. He has nice thighs, too. He doesn't have that chicken leg syndrome, where they're real big up top and then have these little skinny, tiny legs. No, he has a great body.
The first date that we went on, Jimmy had on this white mini skirt. The waist was very thin, and then all of a sudden, pow! Booty just out the window.
She had a really nice body. She was built, really built. And that's what got me. And I didn't really go much further than that.
At UCLA, Carrie Johnson is trying to work out which body shapes are guaranteed to drive us wild. She's photographed hundreds of different bodies and asked hundreds of test subjects to rate them. As her subjects view different bodies, she scans where they look with an eye tracker.
Just look right in the middle, please.
The dot shows where her subjects are focusing. The longer they linger on one spot, the bigger the dot grows.
And you can see that he's looking all over the place. He spends quite a bit of time looking at the person's face. He's looking at her shoulders, up and down her body. He does look at the woman's breasts. That's not surprising at all. Our male participants, we would expect to look there more than our female participants.
A woman's breasts clearly signal that she's past puberty and is probably able to reproduce, so it's no surprise they draw the eye. But they're not the only targets of a man's attention. Recent neuroscience has identified a part of the brain that's intensely active when it's looking at a human body. Carrie Johnson wanted to know just what excited this part of the brain. It turned out to be a tricky question to answer.
If you're looking at a real person walking down the street, there are any number of things that could distract your attention away from the things that we're interested in as scientists. The person might be wearing a very low-cut dress and draw your attention to that region of the body. The person could be wearing jewelry, and all of those things muddy our ability to interpret what might be governing your judgments of attractiveness.
To focus purely on body shape, Carrie designed a series of gray mannequins with no faces, no breasts, no jewelry, all alike except in their body proportions. Then she asked subjects to decide whether the shapes were male or female.
Man. Woman.
Carrie soon noticed a pattern. No matter what shape the body was, viewers looked most often at the hips and the waist.
He had a very clear decision here. It was very easy for him. He looked at the waist and hip region, judged immediately that it was a woman, and looked very quickly to that category. This body is a little bit more ambiguous, and this scanning back and forth might imply that he is just not as sure about this body.
All humans, Carrie discovered, use the hips and the waist as an indicator of a person's gender. The reason is simple. The sex hormones which surge through us at puberty dramatically reshape a woman's waist, from straight to more of an hourglass. Researchers have put a number on what appears to be the sexiest female body shape. Her waist should be 7/10 as wide as her hips. Artwork across the ages shows that this ratio, very similar to the golden ratio, seems to have been the ideal throughout human history. Even for Stone Age humans who carved this 20,000-year-old fertility statue.
When we began this work, the dominant theory in why bodies were attractive really focused on one cue, and that is how curvaceous the body is. And it was theorized that this was because that particular body shape signified health or fertility. The most attractive women were those women that were healthy and that were able to bear children.
But Carrie Johnson's research also uncovered what at first seemed like a serious contradiction to this theory. Although men found the fertile ratio of 7/10 attractive, they found 6/10 and 5/10 even more attractive. And at 5/10, the woman's waist would be so narrow she'd be unable to bear children.
If it were the case that the body's shape is an important cue to health and fertility, then you might expect that judgments of attractiveness would be less for extreme bodies that don't actually exist in nature. In fact, we find the exact opposite. The most attractive bodies in our stimuli are the most extreme. They have the narrowest waist relative to the hips, so narrow that it doesn't exist in nature, and yet our observers say that's attractive.
This seems to fly in the face of all the links scientists have found between sex appeal and health and fertility. But actually, it doesn't. Because the missing piece is that our brains judge how a body looks as it moves.
In the 1970s, some of the first studies of human body motion were conducted by Johansen, who applied reflective material to the body's major joints, essentially ping pong balls or reflective tape. And he filmed people walking or doing jumping jacks, performing many activities. Now, when these videos were played back to observers, all you can see is those points of light moving. And the question was, can people even tell that this is a human? The answer was unequivocal, yes. And this speaks to just how important the body is, and specifically body motion, for social judgments.
So Carrie programmed a series of walks in her gray bodies, gave them a variety of waist sizes, and asked viewers to rate which combination was the sexiest.
What we found when we looked at our participants' judgments is the bodies with kind of a straight torso walking with a masculine shoulder swagger were perceived to be attractive. And the bodies with an hourglass shape, who were walking with a lot of hip sway, were also judged to be attractive. Other combinations, not so attractive.
Johnson seems to have uncovered a mental shortcut for reading cues of masculinity or femininity. In other words, we're lazy. Don't make me think too hard. Is this body worth mating with or not?
What we think is going on is not really anything about health or fertility, but rather the combination of cues. This is an easy combination to understand. This is a masculine man. It's very easy for the person to process, and therefore it's very attractive. On the flip side, when you have a very feminine woman's body shape, it's very easy to process, and therefore it's more attractive to our observers.
And what's true for the observer also seems to hold true for the observed. Carrie asked flesh and blood subjects to walk on a treadmill while she filmed them. She gave half of her subjects one explanation of what she was testing.
What we're going to have you do today is find a comfortable walking speed here on the treadmill, and then we'll analyze your walk motion for its efficiency using a computer algorithm. Okay.
And the other half, another.
Then we'll video record your walking and show it to other people who will evaluate your sexual attractiveness. Okay.
Carrie quickly noticed that the people who thought they were being rated for sexiness tended to exaggerate their movements, trying to look especially masculine or feminine.
When we look at a woman, we expect her hips to be moving laterally a little bit more from side to side. When we're talking about a man's walk motion and a masculine walk motion, we're expecting his shoulders to swagger a little bit more. As well, the men might puff out their arms a little bit more to increase the visible size of their body.
Here's a woman walking normally, and here are the swaying hips of one who thinks she's being judged for sexiness. On the left is a man walking normally, and on the right, notice the swaggering shoulders of a man who's turned on the charm. We appear to have one mental mechanism that looks for people with sexy walks, and another that encourages us to walk sexily when we know we're being watched. The same urges govern the mating habits of the first humans. An irregular walk could betray genetic weaknesses and a limited life expectancy. A sexy strut broadcasts that you were healthy and likely to survive long enough to raise children.
What evolution is about, and we are evolved organisms, is getting your genes into the next generation. And so we are extremely attentive to cues of how healthy this person is, how good are their genes. We have mechanisms that are designed to detect these subtle characteristics in other people.
But not everyone has the perfect body or the perfect face. And here's where sex appeal gets ugly. 20 men and women are about to fight for the best mates, all in the name of science. Our brains work quickly to size up faces and bodies for attractiveness, secretly ranking potential partners, always on the hunt for the healthiest possible genes. But not all of us will be able to snag a perfect 10. We do the best we can.
When my girlfriend and I looked around and I saw Rex, I just stopped because his physique, he was tall like I like.
I was skinnier then.
He had, you know, these nice heavy eyebrows and nice head of hair, and he just stood out. I didn't have to look to the rest of the room, and I didn't care what was on the other side of the room.
He's got that sort of like puppy dog thing going for him, the big brown eyes, and I don't know, he's got a nice smile.
The way she walks, the way she talks, the way that she sort of has a little devilish turned smile, gives you an imperative, makes you feel like a very, very small boy in a room full of men.
As I was turning around, and you know, he was like right there in my face, looking me up and down, saying, "Hi, my name's Donnie."
I felt lucky.
How we decide when to pair up and with whom is a riddle that evolutionary psychologist Douglas Kenrick has tried to solve for decades.
If we all just went for good genes, everyone would be unhappy if the guys didn't end up, with Jennifer Lopez or some other fashion model. They would just stop then, and the women would stop if they couldn't get Brad Pitt or some extremely handsome guy. In real life, people have to match up with one another.
How does this matching up process work? To find out, Dr. Kenrick gathered 10 men and 10 women from a fairly average range of physical attractiveness and prepared to perform a few experiments in human social dynamics. First, he stripped away as many differences as possible between the guinea pigs by dressing them in identical and sexually neutral outfits.
Okay, now you're going to play a sort of a mating game. You all have a number, as you can see. You can't see your own number, but you can see the other people's numbers. Offer your hand to someone, and if they accept it, then you've paired up and you walk back to the back. If the person does not accept your offer, then you'd move on and offer it to someone else. Again, the task being to try to get the highest number that you can, and realizing that you have a number on your own head that they are responding to as well.
The numbers drawn at random are meant to represent desirability, 1 being least and 10 being most. In the real world, where most of us don't know exactly how attractive we are, we tend to aim high, trying to snare a 10. Then, gradually, we work our way down to someone who will accept us.
Some of the people are trying and not getting paired. The 2 people who were 5s have paired up with one another. It wasn't like the 10s perfectly matched and the 1s perfectly matched, but you did get a correlation. The people with the high numbers were able to hold back a little bit longer, and they got more offers. The people with the low numbers didn't get any offers. And that's sort of what happens in a real mating pool.
The experiment opens a window into the mind of an adolescent who is not yet fully aware of how attractive he or she is.
Let's imagine teenagers in a high school. You've got a guy and a girl who are both 10s. Well, what's going to happen to them is they're going to get a lot of offers from the opposite sex, and they're eventually going to have some sense that they have lots of more opportunities. If you're a 5 or a 6, as most people are, they'll let you know. You'll get feedback, basically.
This is something we all have to learn, and it can be a painful process. To glimpse a sped-up version of this learning curve, Dr. Kenrick put a microphone on the woman who was ranked number 3 and asked her to narrate her mate selection strategy.
I guess everyone's going to start off going to the number 10 guy. 3, 1, 4, 10. Oh, 10 is taken now. Nobody will make eye contact with me. I'm not really used to that. I like that one, yeah. But his number's too low. I can do better. Let's see. 1, no, 7. Oh, he's being paired up. I have a feeling I have a very low number because no one's coming over to me at all right now. Come on. 2, no, I can do better than that. We're running out of numbers. 1, 8. I guess this is all that's left. Okay, I'm stuck with 2.
After using random numbers, Dr. Kenrick wanted to see how things would turn out if he let true physical attractiveness drive mate selection. When the volunteers first arrived, before the men and women met face to face, Kenrick had them rate each other's physical appearance on a scale of 1 to 10. He pooled the numbers for each person and came up with an attractiveness rating. Now it's time for the test subjects to try and reel in the most physically attractive person they can.
We we are going to change the rules a little bit. And we're going to begin by asking the ladies to take your head stockings off. Okay, now if the guys would all remove their head coverings. Let your own preferences now, have their way. And again, keeping in mind the last game, try to get the person who you regard as the highest attractiveness in your opinion.
Just as Kenrick expected, each person found a partner within a point or so of themselves. So is it really the case that from the day we're born, the die is cast based purely on the way we look? Thankfully, no. Physical attraction is not the only criterion for choosing a mate. There's a lot more to sex appeal than meets the eye.
I love red wine.
The Hadza of Tanzania, one of the last hunter-gatherer tribes. Not typical subjects for a sex appeal study. But in 2006, scientists came here to find out which men were most successful at passing on their genes. The Hadza are known for their singing and storytelling, so scientists wanted to see if there was a connection between their voices and their ability to attract a sexual partner.
What we've done out there is record a whole bunch of men's voices, and we've recorded how many children that they've had. And what we found is that the men who had the most number of children also tended to have the lowest pitched voices.
Jambo.
And the men with the highest pitched voices tended to have the least number of children.
Ujambo. Jambo. Ujambo. Ujambo.
Jambo. How could the sound of your voice have anything to do with the number of children you father?
We think the significance of a person's voice in terms of its sound may be related to the fact that during most of human evolutionary history, when the sun went down, it was lights out. And therefore, at night, sound was one of the principal domains in which critical kinds of interpersonal interactions occurred.
At the forefront of these nocturnal interactions were seduction and sex. When a woman and a man out on a first date make small talk, a crucial internal antenna for sex appeal is hard at work. That antenna isn't focused on what they're saying, but on how they're saying it.
I love red wine. I love red wine.
Oh my God, his voice is awesomely sexy. Now, his voice can totally take your pants off. That's for sure.
Her voice is, it's that perfectly rich mixture of femininity and clarity.
I like a sweet voice, and she has a sweet voice.
You definitely want to feel like, you're the girl, and if a guy talks maybe softer or sweeter than you, then you may sort of wonder about that.
Dr. David Feinberg has been trying to discover what makes a voice attractive.
There's a lot that we can tell from someone's voice, right, just from the first time we listen to them. We can sort of tell how old somebody is from the sound of their voice. We can tell what sort of emotional state they're in. But one of the more interesting things that we've been looking at in our research is whether you can tell how attractive somebody is from their voice.
When the sunlight strikes.
Feinberg asked male and female students to rate a variety of opposite-sex voices for sex appeal.
When the sunlight strikes raindrops in the air, they act as a prism and form a rainbow.
When the sunlight strikes raindrops in the air, they act as a prism and form a rainbow.
When the sunlight strikes raindrops in the air, they act as a prism and form a rainbow.
When the sunlight strikes raindrops in the air, they act as a prism and form a rainbow.
Nearly across the board, men chose women with higher-pitched voices.
I found the high-pitched voices better. It sounded more feminine.
It really sounded more like someone who was younger, close to my age, and probably more fit.
I thought it was healthier and younger and sexier.
When we think about women's voices, the first thing we might think is men are really liking these soft and low sort of voices. But what our research shows is quite the opposite. One of the main reasons why is that younger women have higher pitched voices, and women with higher estrogen levels also have these higher pitched voices.
And it will probably come as no surprise that women chose men with deeper, more masculine voices.
It just sounds better when they're deeper.
Definitely find a deep voice more attractive for a man.
The deeper voice, it just seems like they might be stronger or bigger, maybe, than the higher pitched voice.
The pitch of the man's voice is really related to how much testosterone the man had at puberty. So men with a lot of testosterone at puberty grow these really low voices, and men with not so much testosterone at puberty have these higher pitched voices. So when women listen to these voices, they may not know that they're picking up on these testosterone cues, but their behavior is acting as if they sort of unconsciously know what's going on here.
What's going on is that women are reacting to clues that reveal much more than the shape of a man's vocal cords. Because testosterone levels in a pubescent boy don't just create a sexy voice, they build a sexy face and usually a sexy body too. Just as in women, high estrogen leads to a more attractive face, waist, more attractive breasts, as well as a higher voice. And there's a fascinating twist to this tale. As women's faces become more appealing during ovulation, so it turns out, do their voices.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Dr. Gordon Gallup of the University at Albany in New York has been studying how estrogen affects the pitch of a woman's voice over the course of her monthly cycle.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
The principal impact of hormones on the sound of a person's voice occur during puberty, but they also occur in adult females as a function of fluctuations in hormone levels during the menstrual cycle.
10 men have volunteered to rate the attractiveness of 10 female voices.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
At the end of the experiment, Dr. Gallup reveals a surprising bit of information to his subjects.
You may or may not have noticed that some of these voices came from the same females. In fact, there were 4 females who participated in this, and we recorded each of their voices at different times during their menstrual cycles.
This is the voice of one of the women.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And here is her voice again at a different point in her cycle.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
The second recording is ever so slightly higher pitched than the first.
3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10.
It was recorded when the woman was ovulating, at her most fertile.
It really did make a difference. I definitely rated them differently, not knowing that they were the same people.
We all seemed to pick the ones that were the most fertile, so it was pretty surprising to me too.
When females are in mid-cycle, when they're the most fertile, the most likely to conceive, their voices are rated as being significantly more attractive.
A beautiful face, a great body, a sexy voice. Created by hormones, driven by genetics. What we call sexiness is just our genes' relentless efforts to sell themselves to the most attractive partner. But is there a way to beat the genetic odds if they're stacked against you? Sex appeal, a subconscious drama playing in our brains, directed by our genes, leading to that all-important climax, choosing the partner with whom you want to mate. And this is where the plot thickens.
For human beings, because we only have a small number of offspring, it's a very important decision who you choose as a mate. A lot of people say, oh, gee, both men and women like attractive partners. But an attractive man is not quite the same as an attractive woman. There's pickiness in both men and women, but we're picky about slightly different things.
The difference between what the sexes want in a partner is reflected in the way they present themselves. Women are the fairer, more ornamented sex. But in the animal kingdom, it's different. Males have developed elaborate adornments to attract the attention of would-be mates. Male peacocks have eye-catching feathers. There's the bold mane of a dominant lion. Human males don't sport such obvious anatomical adornments, but there's one thing they do have. Toys.
A car says a lot about you. It makes you look more stable. It makes you look better. It attracts more. It brings those eyes from the ladies. I mean, that's what it is. A car, in a way, makes you. It's what you drive is what you are.
So human beings, as typical mammals, the selectiveness of females for dominant males leads to competition amongst males. It leads to various kinds of showing off. It's sort of the same thing in a lot of other mammalian species. If you go up to the Rocky Mountain National Park, you'll find those bighorn sheep. The males arrive before the females do, and they butt their heads against one another. The females don't even care to watch the competition. What the females want to know is who won. And so, in some sense, these auto clubs are probably very similar to that the men are just saying, hey, look, the other guys look up to me. And what the women are paying attention to is which guy is at the top of this status. They let the men do the work of deciding who's on top, and then they choose them as mates.
Well, you know, we want somebody, you know, that what I would call a boss, that's, you know, doing big things, that's handling his business. So, you know, he has nice clothes, dressed nice car. I mean, he takes care of himself. He cares about his appearance.
The reason women are choosier about men is because sex can be much costlier for them. Men can have sex and walk away. Women could face 9 months of pregnancy and years of childcare. Women want good genes and deep pockets.
A good analogy is this: if you're going to go out to eat in Los Angeles tonight, you're going to spend $200. You'll read the restaurant reviews, you'll be very careful, and you'll be very disappointed if you don't get a really good meal. If you're going to spend $5 and get something off some guy on the street, you'll be happy with a lot less. Now, from the perspective of evolution, men have the option, all mammalian males have the option of a $5 dinner. Females do not.
Women's desire to share the burden leads them to search for clues beyond simple physical attractiveness. Clues to a man's status, wealth, and overall suitability as a partner and protector of her and her brood.